Recording.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this this EPC policy dialogue on EU-India relations. Very happy to welcome you all here, and special thanks to Ambassador Saurabh Kumar, who's also going to deliver some opening remarks in a moment. Thank you for joining us today to explore the relationship between the EU and India. There is a lot of movement in the relationship. We have seen the Commission President visiting New Delhi, many commissioners being alongside at the end of February. And we are certainly living in a world where the interest in cooperation between EU and India has increased significantly. Where also some of the challenges have increased significantly, not least in the relationship with the White House, which is important to all the actors. I think there are still many challenges. There is also a need for both the EU to understand India better and for India maybe to understand the changes in the EU better, because I think what we're seeing at the moment are quite some fundamental shifts within Europe, which will also influence the relationship for a long time to come. So we're very happy to have this policy dialogue and to have a very knowledgeable panel which can add to this. I will introduce them later on, and there will also be time for question and answers with the audience. But before we get to that part, I will ask Your Excellency to give some opening remarks.
Let me very warmly welcome you for this event. I would like to thank the European Policy Center, Mr. Fabian, for organizing this with us. I would like to thank all the panel members for being out here, particularly my friend and member of European Parliament, Mr. Gozi. As Mr. Fabian Zuleeg mentioned, we are living in very interesting times. The College of Commissioners, led by the President von der Leyen, was very recently in India. It was the first visit of the College of Commissioners to a country outside Europe. They had visited earlier outside Europe, but that was in relation not to a country-to-country exchange, but more in the context of the visit engagement with the African Union. So there was a strong symbolic message in that too. We thought that it would be a good idea to have this engagement so that we can touch upon some of the issues, the past of India-EU relationship, where it is, where we see it going, have a few exchange on the geopolitical environment and how it necessitates India and EU to do more with each other. So I have a kind of a prepared text to guide me through what I say. I would essentially divide my presentation into two parts. The first is to speak a little bit about the strategic outlook from the Delhi end. I thought it would be important to do that because often, I have been here for a year, often I see that the Delhi's point of view is missed. So I thought I would touch upon that. And in the second part, I would touch upon India-EU relations, talk about the visit, its significance, and where we see the relationship moving ahead. So in 2004, India and EU raised their relationship to a strategic partnership. So we have completed 20 years of strategic partnership. It was a very different world when the strategic partnership was established. But in a sense, we can say that the global rebalancing had started then. Non-market economies had already been admitted into the global trading order, which perhaps resulted in short-term gains, but also posed long-term challenges, many of which we face today. In 2008, soon after the establishment of the strategic partnership, we had the global financial crisis, and which showed the weakness of the global financial order. But it also became clearer that global issues needed global solutions, and that led to the formation of the G20. Multipolar order is coming to the fore. I think that became quite clear, as well as the challenges the globe faced. We recall Obama's pivot to Asia and also the development of the Indo-Pacific construct. Remnants of hope of responsible stakeholders in the global order were fading at that point of time, and I'm talking of 2012, 13, 14, 15, that time frame. Challenges were becoming clearer, which became stark during the COVID crisis, with disruptions in supply chains, realization of overdependence and vulnerabilities, and display of geopolitical and geoeconomic muscularity by some. Ukraine-Russia conflict brought its own set of challenges, not only for Europe, but also for the global South, highlighting deep dependencies with impacts, with impact on food, fuel, and fertilizer supply chains, amongst others. Today, we witness heightened uncertainties, geopolitical and geoeconomic tensions, and paradigm shifts in our thinking. As an emergent country post its independence, India found itself in a challenging international environment. Historically, India has tried to create space to give itself strategic autonomy, in the past through non-alignment, and today through more active multi-alignment. Today, we hear more about strategic autonomy in Europe also. The multipolar global order provides a stronger rationale than ever before for India and EU to engage deeper and strengthen their cooperation. So with this background, let me briefly touch upon India-EU relations. I think it is important for us to cooperate amongst other reasons, also because we are large democracies, open market economies, pluralistic societies with commitment to multilateralism and rules-based order. I think for both of us, this is very important. We believe that deeper ties would not, our deeper ties would not only would be for our bilateral benefit, but also for the larger global good. We have economic convergences, which also provide the rationale for us to work closer together. And needless to say that, you know, there are, I think, I mean, I do not want to go into the facts and figures, but emphasize the point that in the economic domain, if you look at trade figures, if you look at investment figures, if you look at Indian companies in Europe, European companies in India, I think our engagement is substantial. Let me touch upon a few factors which I think makes India very attractive today, including to Europe. We are the fastest growing major economy. We are the 5th largest now. We would be the 3rd largest before the turn of the decade. Our long-term ambitions are that when we are 100 years old as an independent country in 2047, our economy would be over 30 trillion US dollars. The share of consumption in GDP in India is 58%. So you can understand that it is a consumption-driven economy. And as the economy grows, the share of the market is only going to grow. So this becomes important for businesses and others who are thinking of India as a destination. Large-scale measures have been taken in India to improve productivity and ease of doing business, and I would mention a few out here. Tax reforms, I think earlier, because of our federal system, taxation used to be a challenge. All that has been streamlined. Large-scale infrastructure development is taking place. We are building 20 kilometers of highways every day. You know, in the last 10 years, the number of airports in India have doubled from 70 to 140. I was told recently that they would triple. So you see, I mean, it gives you a sense of pace of development. We have placed an order for over 1,000 aircrafts, many from Boeing, many from Airbus. So I think this is the pace, and I think we are a small country, or rather we are a young country, not a small country. So and the GDP per capita is 3,000 US dollars. So there is tremendous depth in terms of the growth which would take place. So I was mentioning the tax reforms, large-scale infrastructure development, digitization of the economy again has and is playing a major role in terms of bringing in efficiencies and productivity through digital public infrastructure. And these are some of the changes. I mean, a whole session can be devoted to perhaps the theme we can call it India Today. We have large-skilled working population, particularly in the STEM sector. So I think you have manpower. There is macroeconomic stability. We are committed to green and sustainable development, which again, Europe is emphasizing on. So we have convergence there. Government has launched many attractive government schemes which need to be looked at, particularly in Europe. And I would name again a few. Make in India to give Indian manufacturing a boost. So those companies in Europe who are interested in investing in India, this becomes a opportunity for them. Linked to manufacturing is production-linked incentives of the government. Digital India, I just mentioned to you about, the digital public infrastructure and the progress made in digital domain. And this is again something we can work with Europe. Startup ecosystem in India, it's the third largest. Venture capital industry has grown tremendously. So that is another area. And lastly, I think something which is hugely important for businesses, India offers good return on capital. Coming back to the visit, India looked upon the visit as an important initiative, both substantive, and I would recommend that those of you who have not had a look at the leaders' statement, which came out of the summit, please do take a look at it. But the visit was also important in terms of conveying a very important symbolic message. It was logistically not an easy visit to handle. We had 20 bilateral meetings between our ministers and trade commissioners, all organized within a window of 2.5 hours. And immediately after that was the plenary session between the Prime Minister and President von der Leyen with their teams. And all the outcomes of these bilaterals fed into the plenary. So, you can imagine we were on a very high gear mode to get the outcomes of these bilaterals and give it to the principals so that a discussion could take place on these. We also, some of you would be knowing, we have a Trade and Technology Council, TTC. TTC meeting took place, and I think that produced another outcome document, which again is worth looking at. Substantial ground has been covered between last TTC meeting and now. And of course, President von der Leyen, I forgot to mention, had a restrictive meeting with the Prime Minister also. And the atmospherics was outstanding. I had the opportunity to have a short conversation with President von der Leyen before she left Delhi at the airport, and she was extremely satisfied with the way the visit had gone. She also gave a very important and very substantive address while she was in Delhi. Now, I do not want to go into details of the outcomes. I think, as I mentioned, the leader's statement captures it all. I would just highlight a few points. The free trade agreement, as you know, has been under discussion between India and EU. There was an understanding to try and complete it before the end of the year, and also to do the same with the investment promotion agreement and the agreement on geographical indications. On the technology side, again, I think this is an area, a lot of points are there in the joint statement, and it covers the entire spectrum, particularly in the area of high technology, semiconductor ecosystem, artificial intelligence, high performance computing, 6G, joint research and innovation in the area of green and clean technology, and very importantly, to try and get industries from our side, both our sides, to engage more with each other. Connectivity and IMEC, which is the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. I think there was a discussion on that, and a very substantive outcome in terms of getting all the stakeholders and having a meeting on IMEC in the near future. Strengthening cooperation in areas in which we are already engaging, things like water, smart and sustainable urbanization and mobility, disaster risk reduction, etc., etc. Security and defense partnership also found a mention, not only found a mention, but was discussed in some detail. Let me conclude by saying, where do we see the relationship going from here? I would like to mention that India's relations with European partners, India's relationship with European partners, individual European countries have deepened over the last couple of years. The engagement has increased. The cooperation across the board has increased. Prime Minister, as you all would have noted, hosted the AI summit with President of France sometime back. Chancellor Scholz was in India. The Indo-Pacific Chamber of German companies had a meeting in India, so I can go on. So the point I'm making is that, at the EU level also, we are working to raise the relationship to the same level. We look forward to concluding the FTA, as I have already mentioned, and the other agreement. It is important for us to build a trusted partner relationship when it comes to trade and technology and deepen our ties in both these areas. So that, again, would be something the two sides would be working together. Defense, maritime domain awareness, interoperability, joint projects are all areas which would be looked at as we go ahead. Deepening people-to-people ties, exchange of students studying in each other's universities, and deepening of relationship between the two parliaments and exchange between the parliamentarians. That is again something which is on the agenda. On a larger strategic level, I think there is commitment on both the sides to our common values, multilateralism, and rules-based order, and the larger understanding that deepening of our relationship is not only for our mutual benefit, but for the larger global good, as I have already mentioned. Now, I mentioned in the beginning, and I'll be concluding with this, 20 years of India-EU strategic partnership resulted in the relationship deepening and growing. But at the same time, it would not be inaccurate to say that the relationship did not deliver as much as it was expected to. We do hope that in the third decade, with this initiative which has been made, the foundations of our relationship would become stronger. Our relationship would grow and prosper, would encompass new areas. And as we head for the next summit, which ought to happen towards the end of this year, the dates are still to be worked on, we should be in a position to have a fresh new roadmap for India-EU cooperation, which, as our Prime Minister said, ought to be a lot deeper, richer than the earlier roadmap, and we would be working towards that direction. This is all I had to say. We have a busy agenda. I understand that the European Union side would also be coming out with a strategy of its own on India. We have different dialogue mechanisms. All those mechanisms would be engaging in the next months in the lead up to the summit. So as an ambassador, I think it's a good time for me to be out here and to contribute and do my little bit to take the relationship further ahead. So let me conclude with those words. Let me again thank European Policy Center and all the panelists for being out here. Thank you very much. I think one of the things which we definitely need to do is to create more awareness about India and about the possibilities in India-EU relationship more. And I think that was one of the messages and one of the reasons why President von der Leyen visited India herself and took the College of Commissioners there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I think it shows very clearly the potential which is there across all of the core objectives of Europe: prosperity, sustainability, security, and democracy, which are all under threat at the moment. So it makes imminent common sense to cooperate. But experience shows that common sense doesn't always happen. So I want to also challenge the panelists to think a bit about what are the potential barriers, what are the potential difficulties we might encounter in moving towards fulfilling the promise which has just been mentioned by the ambassador. So each panelist will have 8-10 minutes to kick off, and then we'll have some questions here before going to the question and answer. And I'll start with Sandro Gozi. You were already mentioned, but clearly a member of the European Parliament and president of the EU-India Association. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be here, and I want to thank warmly Ambassador Kumar and the India Embassy and the European Policy Center for organizing this very timely event, and also for allowing me to share with you some thoughts. Just at 3:15, as you know, I have to leave you. But I mean, I announced already now. Ambassador Kumar was saying that he's very lucky to be here in this moment of a new page of India-EU relationship. I say that we are very lucky to have an ambassador, an excellent ambassador like you, with your excellent diplomatic skills and also strong influence in the diplomatic corps as India ambassador in this very important moment. I mean, you already said I don't want to start from the gloomy picture, but it's not me who make the picture gloomy. It's the fact that we live in an age of anxiety. And when you live in an age of anxiety, the friends should become better friends. I think that in very simple words, this is what we have decided to do between Brussels and Delhi. We want to become better friends because we need more each other. And we need more each other because, you know, they say that it was Lenin to have said this phrase. I don't know if it was Lenin, but the phrase is absolutely pertinent to describe this moment. There are decades where nothing happened, and there are weeks where decades happen. And we are living one of these weeks. So it is clear that we have to rethink our way to stay on the world stage, and also the strategic partnership to allow us to protect our values and promote our interests in this new setting. New setting which is, I mean, work in progress, because after all, we are living a long transition of global world disorder. And it is clear that, I mean, the old world is almost over because, I mean, World Trade Organization is not working at all. It is blocked. It seems like a century when you used to talk about efficient multilateralism. The multilateral cooperation work less and less. The contribution and the participation of the United States of America, at least for 4 years, at in the different United Nations institutions and agencies, is submitted to a sort of review, and the outcome of this review will depend on the satisfactory result, but already we see that the United States has withdrawn from the World Health Organization. There is, in my view, a pretty deliberate strategy of Washington to establish a new dialogue and possibly, from their perspective, alliance with Putin and Russia. And this is explained what is happening around Ukraine, but it's also explaining the aggressive stance of the US towards the Union. It is clear that, I mean, we want to remain friends with the United States of America. At the moment, we are not very friends with someone who said that the European Union was born to screw the US, quote, unquote. I mean, it's not me. Then there is clearly a strong competition against China, and from this perspective are much less positive about China than most of the Brussels, folk, and always been less positive than most of the Brussels folk. It is clear that, I mean, we are challenged in terms of economic dominance, in terms of smooth trade cooperation, in terms of security by Beijing, by Moscow. And now, at the moment, it seems, we hope that we manage to smoothen the tension at the moment, but let's say that at least it's an open question, our relations with the United States of America. So I think that this is the context why it was very timely decision, the decision taken by the President of the European Commission to organize the first collective trip abroad, official collective trip abroad of the college as such. The European Commission has never done so. The ambassador was very right in underlining this, because we have to think how we can forge new alliances, enhance current alliances in a world that at the moment is pretty, I mean, disorder and around emerging poles, or I mean, around actors that are more and more assertive in this new war. So it is clear that the relation with India, like the relation with Latin America, like the presence of the European in the Indo-Pacific region, like the also the rethink of possibly enhancing of our relation with Japan, the closer relationship that because of security and military challenges we are developing with Norway, with Canada, the renew agenda. I'm the chair of the EU-UK Partnership Parliamentary Assembly. I mean, the document that you had just approved 48 hours ago that indicates clearly that, I mean, at least for security, but not only for security, also for innovation, climate change, we have also to turn the page and enter a new phase in the partnership between the EU and UK. This is the context within which we have decided, together with our friends in Delhi, to try to, I mean, strengthen our bilateral relationship. The goal which have been set are very ambitious. I'm very ambitious. I mean, I've been following the relations both of France and Italy with India and of the EU since 2007. And to have to read in the joint statement, the final communique after the visit to Delhi, that now by the end of the year, we want to conclude the trade agreement, allow me to raise some, I mean, to say at least that this is challenging. It is challenging. Then, I mean, I hope we will make it, but it is challenging. It's challenging because there are very substantial issues that we have to tackle. There is our climate policy, carbon adjustment mechanism, for example. I had a long meeting with the India trade minister. They say that it was very clear in telling me what they think about the carbon adjustment mechanism. From our side, we see that there are some criticism. So, I mean, there is a lot of work to do, but it is important to raise the to have more ambitious goal, because we both need to, I mean, to strengthen the relationship. So certainly, from this perspective, I think that it's very important to concentrate our effort for the trade agreement, as it is very important, and we have already started, especially, I mean, between some member states and India. I mean, Ambassador was recalling the stronger and stronger relationship that there is between France and India. I mean, not only for artificial intelligence, but also for security and defense. I think that these all I mean, goes toward the same direction, because the technological challenge, the artificial intelligence challenges, but also the security and defense challenges can, I mean, should and must push us to cooperate more. I think it's very important that in the last years, thanks to the pressure of some of us, the European Union has finally started to see itself also as an Indo-Pacific actor. It's pretty recent, it's pretty new. And this is another reason why, I mean, of course, we have common interest. And I think that after all, if one option for, I mean, for the settlement of this new world disorder is an arrangement between Washington and Beijing, I think that the real challenge to this and to ensure a more plural organization of the world is an axis, a cooperation between New Delhi and Brussels. And I think that we should also to think what we want to do better together in the United Nations system. I mean, because that's another area where I think that there is a potential for cooperation between India and the European Union. I strongly believe on artificial intelligence dialogue. I think the Trade and Technology Council was an excellent idea. I think that now it's a very good vehicle. And I think also the summit on artificial intelligence in Paris, I mean, identify what should be our agenda. It is impossible, it is extremely difficult today to talk about the global governance of artificial intelligence, but it is clear that it is the time to set at least some common principles and some target in terms of common standard if we want to be successful as a mankind globally to win the challenge of artificial intelligence. So I say that Narendra Modi and Emmanuel Macron together chair the summit. It was also not only from the symbolic point of view a very important message. The last 2 points I want to dwell. It is clear also what we can do with the green transition, the hydrogen valley, the cooperation between India and EU in the hydrogen sector, in the energy sector. I think that this is another area where we should be, it is and will be in our common agenda. And then there are 2 points that the ambassador has mentioned that are very important from my perspective. We have to better structure our parliamentary relationship, because I think that would deserve something similar, if not identical, with what we have with the United Kingdom. We have really a parliamentary assembly co-chaired by European Parliament, me, and a member of the House of Commons. We meet twice per year. I think that we should aim to something similar. So, I mean, I really hope that from the Indian side, good news will come soon. And last but not least, I think that also youth opportunity, youth mobility, youth exchanges are very important because, and to be my very last point, what has really changed in the last years that we have to start to understand and to know each other better. India only recently started to see the European Union as a geopolitical and economic actor. And only recently we as Europeans have understood the full potential beyond the romanticism of India, which remains ambassador, but the full potential of India as an actor of the future. And I think that for this, we have to enhance youth exchange and youth mobility. So this is the few thoughts that I wanted to share with you. I thank you very much again for the invitation, and let's see at the end of the year, we will have the trade agreement, Ambassador. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Also taking the question I had, because I was going to ask how realistic it is to have an FTA in this time frame. But I still will want to insist with the panelists that I also want to get into the difficult areas. And there are 2 which I think strike me particularly. I think one is this question of the multipolar world, because from my perspective, multipolar is not an ordering principle. And the danger is that rather than having a however flawed rules-based order, we are replacing it with chaos, with a world where might is right, and where some of the actors are abusing the international systems which are there. So what can actually be done to make sure that whether that's the multilateral system or the global system, how can we make sure that there is some form of common guardrails to cooperate in? And the other elephant in the room, we have already mentioned Trump, so I don't mean that one, but I mean Russia. And clearly there is a long relationship between India and Russia. We are in a situation in Europe where the vast majority of Europeans see Russia as a very direct threat to our own security, let alone what Russia is doing in its war of aggression against Ukraine. So how does that play into the relationship between the EU and India? So I'll turn next to Sylvia Malinbaum, who's the head of India and South Asia research at Ifri.
Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. So I just want first to mention that I've just landed from Delhi this morning, where I attended the Resina dialogue. So I really hope I can bring you also fresh insights into the debate. But still, it was important for me to be here today and to have this very interesting conversation with the rest of the speakers. So first, I want to join what has been said by Ambassador during his presentation, and to remind that yes, EU and India cooperation already exists for a long time. You mentioned the 20 years of the strategic partnerships, meaning that in many aspects, we already do cooperation. So just first to give you a very concrete example to understand what we do together. For example, recently, we have started to do some maritime naval exercises together. We are also doing some maritime cooperation under, for example, an operation called Atalanta, where we cooperate off the coast of Somalia to fight against piracy, narco traffic. So those are very concrete illustrations. 2 years ago, we have also decided to have, let's say, to better structured our business relations. So we have created the FEBI, Federation of European Business in India. It was an important step, I think, as well in the business dialogue. That is important, of course. And of course, you mentioned the IMEC project, which for me is probably one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects of the coming decades. So this is this huge, we can talk about it maybe later, but this huge project that will connect India to Europe. So why such a focus in 2025? There is definitely this consensus that 2025 is a historic moment to reinforce our ties between Europe and India. So definitely I agree with what has been said about one of the main reasons, of course, is all this geopolitical turbulence we've seen around. And that turbulence is definitely pushing us to diversify and to seek more stable partners. But from the Indian perspective, I think it's important, and I'm coming to the question multipolarity, to understand that really India is a strong advocate of a multipolar world, which means India, and this is something that has been said to me yesterday by Indian diplomats, India really wants a strong Europe, because for a multipolar world, having strong Europe is a necessity. So this is the first point. And then Trump, yes. There was, Prime Minister Modi has been in Washington. He was, I think, one of the first to get an official visit under the second Trump administration. And the relationship is quite good for sure, but yet Trump has regularly accused India of being what he called a global trade abuser, meaning he considers that India is putting high tariff and is too protectionist. So he has announced reciprocal tariff for the 2nd of April, because he thought he wanted to do it 1st of April, but he thought people will think it's a joke. But no, it is serious. So I think we have to take it seriously. And still, I know there are some discussion and negotiation also going on with India. But I think for India, this is, it may be, of course, impactful, because India, for India, US is one, I think it's its biggest market for exports. And from the European perspective, definitely the weakening of the transatlantic bond also accelerating this dynamic of strengthening the ties with Europe. So interestingly, in Europe, you have one partner, France, that has been historically, I would say, the privileged partner for India in Europe. So I'm French, so I can talk about it a little, but in France, we have established a long-standing partnership. The strategic partnership is dating back 1998, so more than 25 years. But interestingly, I would say those last years, we have seen other European countries trying to engage more and more with India. So for example, Germany. Germany has many interests. One of the interests is hydrogen, green hydrogen. India may be an interesting supplier of green hydrogen for Germany to diversify its suppliers. And one of our, other EU members also have engaged conversations, like with India, Netherlands, Poland, Austria, Hungary. But I'm coming now to my second point. How do we successfully engage more together? And this one is important to say. I think that our partnership should really be driven by clear goals, a strategic ambition, and we should not only go together because we are facing similar challenges in this very turbulent world. So to put it simply, I think our partnership should be driven by a strategic ambition and not only by necessity. And this is exactly the sense of this a new EU roadmap you were mentioning, the 2025-2030 roadmap, where we have to explore all the opportunities we may have. So the first one I see, of course, is to connect our respective markets with a comprehensive free trade agreement. And the term comprehensive is important. If we put together our respective markets, we'll be able to connect 2 billion people. It means almost 1 in 4 people on the planet. And it represents a fifth of global GDP. So potentially it opens up enormous business opportunities. But yes, yet it's extremely challenging, as shown by the complexity of the negotiation of this FTA. What we see now is that India and EU economies are not exactly on the same stage of development. We do not regulate our economies the same way. We also both want to protect our most fragile economic sectors, which is normal. And we also may have, I would say, different priorities. You were mentioning, for example, the environment and aspiration. But if we are able to address those difficulties and to conclude an FTA, definitely it would send a very strong signal of our determination. Another point I heard at Resina, and I think it's important, is that India does not want to be seen only as a potential market. It really wants to be recognized also as a strategic partner. So we talk about security and defense. I think we have also new promising areas of cooperation in this sector, cybersecurity, that has become very crucial with the growing digitalization of our respective economies. You know that India has already done a lot of progress in digital. The protection of critical infrastructure, for example, the underwater cables. This has becoming also something of interest for our partnership. And interestingly as well, India also expressed its interest in being part of the European rearmament efforts. As you know, in Europe, we are trying to develop our defense industry capacities, and also India has done, I would say, rapid progress in its own defense industry capacities. So to conclude, I want also to give a last insights. We were discussing about it just before the session. At the RISNA dialogue, we had some hearing some rumors, nothing official, about sending Indian troops as part of the peacekeeping effort in Ukraine. It's still very uncertain, and we don't know if it will materialize, but I thought it was interesting to mention it because it also shows, it reflects India's ambition to transition from a regional power to a global power. It would be a very big shift if it happens, but also, and it's allow me to conclude on this, shows the very unique ability of India to act as a bridge between the Western and the global South. Thank you. I stop here.
Thank you very much. I think, and I'm going to say something a little bit self-serving from a think tank perspective, but I think, Razina, these kind of formats actually show how much activity there now is in the exchange between think tanks, in the behind the scenes discussions around what can be achieved. And it shows how important those kind of channels have now become, and I would expect that they become even more important. So I think this is also a call to the Brussels policy community to recognize that we need to do more to support these kind of formats, because they are crucial in finding where the common interests lie, where we can work together. I'll now turn to Lizza Bomassi, who's a research analyst for the Indo-Pacific in EUISS.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you to EPC and the Embassy of India for organizing this. I work for the EU, but I'm not representing any official perspective. So I just wanted to put that out there. I also wanted to apologize to Ambassador because a lot of the points that I'm going to say are similar to the ones that that I brought up last week when we were together. It's already been said, this is a strategic moment for EU-India relations. The visit of the Commission, the full College of Commissioners and President von der Leyen last month was big. It was very symbolic. India matters, especially right now. And I think the fact that that visit was swiftly followed by the latest round of negotiations on the FTA also suggests that real momentum is now there, something that we haven't seen in a while. So India's significance is clear. I mean, it's the world's largest democracy. It's the 5th largest economy in the world. It's an essential economic partner for Europe. But beyond these headlines, I think we also need to be cognizant that India also faces a bit of an economic challenge. Between now and 2030, the Indian government has to create 115 million new jobs to accommodate its growing workforce. Just to put that into perspective, that's 1/5 of the EU population. That's big. This demographic reality means India must accelerate its industrial growth. So the schemes that Ambassador already cited, like Make in India, the production linked incentive schemes, these are really important. And Europe, with its advanced technological and industrial expertise, its investment capacity is uniquely positioned to complement India's ambitions. And if I can say, the EU-India partnership is probably one of the most economically complementary relationships available to Europe today. But despite the clear economic logic, the EU and India FTA has been stuck for those of you that have been following this for almost 2 decades now. Negotiations began in 2007. In the meantime, both sides have demonstrated an ability to get these types of agreements through the finishing line with other partners. India has done this with Australia, the United Arab Emirates, the EFTA countries, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland, for example. The EU has done this with Japan, with Singapore, Vietnam, South Korea. So this prolonged impasse, I think, it really does stand out. And this deadlock stems from deeply held concerns on both sides, structural complexities. For India, the EU's, this has been referenced, the EU's regulatory framework linked to the Green Deal is very problematic. The Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, CBAM, the Corporate Due Diligence Directive also are seen as overly prescriptive, disproportionately burdensome, and not linked to what's happening on the ground. For Europe, India's intellectual property rules, the regulatory frameworks remain areas of concern, and the EU is really pushing for stronger intellectual property protections. And for both market access and sensitive sectors, specifically agriculture remains a sticking point. So I think these are things which really need to be worked out carefully. Compounding this is also a broader geopolitical divergence. This has been mentioned before. India's perspectives, especially regarding Russia, contrast with Europe's security concerns. And at the same time, India views Europe's over-reliance on the United States, at least for now, and exposure, I think, to China as also quite problematic. But there is momentum. I mean, we've talked about the TTC, we've talked about IMEC. There's a lot of initiatives on the ground that are happening, all of the exchanges with think tanks, universities. But these are not insignificant challenges, and they have knock-on effects on getting the FTA done. And I think with this accelerated time frame, the pressure is on. So given these challenges, what's a potential path forward? Perhaps more flexibility, looking at early wins rather than waiting for the perfect comprehensive agreement. I know that this is something that's important, but maybe we can do it more in a more modular sector-based approach. I mean, this is already happening in practice through the TTC. I think the key is to finding how that can be translated into other sectors, perhaps renewable energy. Also, another important thing is to ensure that there is a sort of feedback loop, so that it's not just at the policy level that this is happening, but that we're building in perspectives at the state and operational business level, so that we are taking on board also what's happening on the ground. We tend to forget in Europe that India is a federal republic. It has 28 states and 8 union territories. We have 27 members, they have 36. I mean, that's of course, there are key differences. India is a nation state, the EU is a union of nation states. But just as we have Germany, France, Estonia, India has Gujarat, it has Uttar Pradesh, it has West Bengal. These are not negligible things. I think political realism also remains important going forward. Regulatory divergence remains one of the biggest barriers to finalizing the FTA. I've talked about the Green Deal. We need to find a way, because this is mutually beneficial for both sides, and we need to find a way to sell this as a shared climate resilience strategy, as opposed to something coming from Brussels and being disregarded. Tech leakage concerns also need to be addressed, of course. European companies need to feel confident about investing in India. So we have to find pragmatic compromises, and I don't think that that's going to be easy, but I think that this is a key moment. The momentum is there. So let me close I'll just close on 3 final points. This is a strategic window that we have right now. I don't know how long it will be open for, so we need to take advantage of it. Let's think about a flexible approach instead of going in for the perfect comprehensive deal. And then we need to be mutually realistic about expectations on each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do wonder in how far, if you like, the transactional mindset will get us very far. If it is really about simply exchanging interests, is that enough to get us over the line, given that there are also big roadblocks and differences on critical issues? So I'll turn to Ummu Bava, who's the Jean Monnet Chair at the Center for European Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University, but also at this moment in time in Berlin. So seeing a bit the European side close up at a time of a lot of change in Germany. So it'll be interesting to hear your reflections on that as well.
Thank you, Fabian. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the Embassy of India and EPC for this opportunity to be here and to join in person. Thank you so much. Let me put a different take on things. I have been looking at EU now for more than 35 years. It's been a long while. It's not something which is a new passion, as for some people it would be. Let me offer the following points for your consideration. I think when you look at 60 years of a relationship, it obviously has gone through many political seasons. And in that, the last 20 years has been a strategic partnership. In 2020, the EU and India agreed on a strategic roadmap, which comes to an end this year, 2025. In 2021, they launched the EU-India connectivity strategy as well with 4 pillars. And in all of this, I think the big question on the table is, which as my colleagues on the panel have been saying, is this a decisive moment? And I think to ask that question, you've got to frame it, Fabian, as you said, in a much larger political question. And that fundamental question is the international system as we know it today getting redefined? Has 80 years of something which was created in 1945 reached an end? Or are those assumptions which kept the politics together coming to an end? I think you will have to clearly divide how these ideas resonate around the world. Because here in Europe, something fundamental has shifted. And that is your partnership and the link in the transatlantic. The assumption of what Article 5 within NATO produces for a European security architecture. There has never been an Asian security architecture. Anybody who talks about an Asian NATO doesn't even understand the geopolitics of the region. For as far as India knows from 1947, India has only had itself to defend itself. I think you've got to recognize certain fundamental assumptions of politics which drive the kind of analysis you make. And so the first point is, for us, self-help has been the only way. For Europe in 47, self-help came within a larger collective of countries together. And then, of course, from 49 with NATO. And so you discover a moment of vulnerability which does not translate commensurately with what we feel, because we've always had moments of vulnerability and we've only had ourselves to look out for our own back. I think that is important to recognize. The question is, politically at this point in time, does your moment of vulnerability then in some way come close to what we have in Asia, or let me put it more closer, in South Asia understood? Would you recognize a point of convergence? Because that is extremely important to shift the language of the conversation. I think the ambassador also pointed out, and ambassadors here, this is a relationship which has really not reached its potential. We've added 2 words into the relationship in 2004, and that was strategic partnership, right? It was also within the larger scheme of things. In 2003, the EU came out with a security strategy, and it talked about partnerships, and that's where India figured in. But I think the point today is, if we move from that, we are navigating a complex geopolitical reality, but those 2 realities play out very differently in this part of the world and in our part of the world, in South Asia. And if I should expand the ambit, whether you want to call it the Indo-Pacific or the larger Asia, right? And I think when you're looking at 2 very different geopolitical complex realities, we've got to recognize, third point, is that our exposure to geography does not produce the same commensurate kind of results. It can produce the propensity to recognize that we have vulnerabilities. Your vulnerabilities to Russia are newly defined by you. And I say that newly defined because till 24th of February 2022, you did not think of Russia in that same strategic challenge. And I need to emphasize this because at some point, you will have to come to terms with your geographic reality, as India has to do with the fact that we are the only country which has boots on the ground to China. I'm not talking of maritime, I'm talking of land, right? And that is something which nobody here recognizes. It's a continuing cost on India. Lisa was pointing out, like, we have this huge demographic dividend. We would have to scale up to produce the employment. And I'm sure that we will come up. It's a land which is known, and I'm not here to do the PR because the ambassador is here to do that. I'm not a diplomat by training. I'm an academic. I'm used to being critical. But I think I see tremendous flexibility and potential. What I want to ask and I want to put in front of everybody is, can we, that is Europe and India, can we go beyond just the values discourse? I think we've done that for too long. I think we have to find a new language of strategic communication, a language which emphasizes interest. There's nothing wrong in interest. You can go through a lexicon and give it whatever word you like. Call it being pragmatic, call it being realistic. But I think the values language has been overstretched and overused, in my opinion, coming from Delhi, by Brussels too much. Because that's not a language you use in a similar way with all your strategic partners, right? I mean, that's not the language I see being used with China. Let's look at and unpack the Commission document of 2019, or even Germany's China policy, which came out recently. And then if you look at the politics of delivery, I mean, you had Chancellor Scholz just after that, going off to the summit of the G20 in Indonesia via Beijing. The message was very clear. And the reason for that is business doesn't follow politics just because politics has decided to turn 180 degrees west, right? I think it's important to recognize that business and politics don't have same timetables. Third point is, can we, in this changing shift where you spoke about multipolar world and a rules-based order, can we find a new axis of cooperation? I think that's important to ask. In the 2 weeks I've been here in Europe, I've been asking people, how do you see cooperation play out? And I think there's an existential feeling of vulnerability in Europe, which I have never experienced in all my years of looking at Europe. For all purposes, Article 5 of NATO is over. So I was in a very interesting, just starting off discussion in Berlin last week. And I said, okay, there is Article 42.7 of the European Union Treaty. What happened about that? Nobody's talking about it. Right? And that shows you the limited focus and how much security has been actually offshored to somebody else. It has never been your problem. So I think, let me close for the sake of, to ask three important things. A, systems have, as we say, I mean, if I were to borrow from computers, they have an operating system, right? And periodically, you will get an upgrade. The question to ask for us as India and Europe is, do we want to really upgrade our operating system, right? I mean, Lizza, you were pointing about, we are more looking at each other as actors, but I think the truest sense would be to recognize there's an immense potential, but let's be extremely realistic that for both of us, we are in a position where we could transform the fundamental nature of the relationship. But that means to recognize that the other can be a very important deliverable. And we have to then lay down what is the deliverable. I think we need to get beyond trade. We put all the eggs in the last basket, 2007 to 13, we didn't go anywhere. I think New Delhi is very open to doing trade agreements. We will get a trade agreement, but let's not converge new issues, what I would call, and somebody would not like it in the House, as non-tariff barriers, right? I mean, you cannot start putting new things onto let's keep it as a simple trade agreement. I think you will get a lot transacted. So do we want a new operating system? And that will also mean a new operational strategy, because your next roadmap from 25 onwards has to take into fact that you are looking at a Delhi and an India, which is not just emerging. It's not a continuous verb. I mean, we're getting there to being, the third largest economy. And that economic potential will speak for itself, will also be visible in the role that Delhi is going to do. If the rules-based order is breaking down, I think we will also have to ask how much is Europe, along with India, willing to invest into the institutional apparatus which continues to exist. I don't think the apparatus has totally broken down. One important element is pulled out of it. But the demand for that apparatus to produce output is going to continue to exist. I don't see anything else replacing it. I mean, are we going to step up is going to be a question which we would have to ask ourselves. And third is probably, how do we redefine our interest? I think I would very clearly put, Sylvia, you also pointed out to a few maritime exercises we've done. Security has for long been something out of the strategic partnership. I think part of the problem has been European in design. Europe has never put out itself as a security actor. It is still a very nascent actor. I think that is the fundamental problem. The member states, on the other hand, are the biggest deliveries of the strategic partnership, right? And that's the reason you see more political momentum on the bilateral, whether it's the India-France, India-Germany, India-Netherlands, Denmark, you name it. We see more traction over there. And the biggest shift has to be the perception shift, which I think has to take place on both sides. Let me stop.
Thank you very much. It's very good to be challenged because I think there are fundamental questions Europe has to answer in its own future, but of course that has a tremendous also impact on its relationship with the rest of the world. I would say what is happening at the moment is fundamental. It is a change in the very basics of the system which was created after the Second World War. And I think what we are looking at is actually a shift in the fundamental underlying architecture of how Europe is working. So the question also would be, are international partners like India ready for the new Europe which will emerge from this, which will do things differently than it has been done in the past, and in some areas that might be more challenging and less predictable than it has been up to now. But as I said, I want to open it up also to the audience. So if you have any questions, comments, then please come in. If you can identify who you are, and I'll collect maybe 2 or 3 before I go back to the panel. And also to just invite the ambassador, if he wants to come in on any of the points, to also feel free. But there's a first one here.
Thank you. Nawab Khan, a freelance journalist from India. And without revealing my age, I'm one of the few persons who are maybe present here who attended the 2004 signing of the EU-India Strategic Partnership in The Hague. So I've been following the relation for the last 20 years, EU and India. Secondly, in about 20 years ago, I did a project for the European Commission on promoting EU-India media relations. I will just make a few observations as a journalist. First and foremost, as the ambassador rightly commented, that relations did not develop as hoped for in all these years. Secondly, as Ummu Salma mentioned, the focus of India and other countries' relations in the Asia are more bilateral. And if you, on the common people, I'm talking as a common person, a journalist, if you ask him where is Athens or Rome or London, he would know. But if you say Brussels, hardly anyone. So the European Union continues to be an unknown. Right. Secondly, I will not take much time here, but the media cooperation between EU and India is nearly non-existent. And I'll give you an example that since I've been here, there is not one correspondent from India writing full-time for an Indian press, except for a break of 2 years when Pallavi was here. So I think that what we need is a more projection of the media to inform the common people, what's happening. And for this reason, I've started writing for an Urdu press in Calcutta, I come from, so that the people who do not read English, a lot of them do, they should know what is happening in the EU in their languages. So I end here. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you. My name is Patrizia Kogo, and I write a newsletter called India Watch Briefing. I have a question about some of Sylvia's and Ummu Salma Bava's points about what the EU can learn from India, because you have referred to this large margin of maneuver that India has as an actor. India is able to meet Putin 1 week, the next one Ukraine. We're also talking about we have heard many times how analysts refer to India as a transactionalist actor. So my question in essence is what the EU can learn from India in these turbulent times. Thank you.
So I'm Claudia from Europe Jacques Delors, a Brussels-based think tank working on sustainability issues. And I found very interesting the points made about the idea of a more pragmatic approach to the FTA, because I don't know if you might have seen, but the chief trade negotiator from the Commission yesterday went to the Parliament and proposed exactly something similar to that. He said that negotiations are quite challenging and this is a time for a difficult decision. So my question to you is, so the way forward, is it to reduce the scope of the FTA, for instance, on the EU side, to ask for less sustainability demands, I guess, because it's something that also the commissioner, the chief trade negotiator raised, like the idea that an FTA like the one that was signed with the New Zealand it's going to be very challenging, or is it like to explore new forms of cooperation, for instance, like a clean trade and investment partnership, like the one that was announced last week with South Africa? What are your thoughts on that? And then I have one more question on CBAM, because I know that this has been like a big contentious issue in bilateral relations, and India has threatened several times to take the EU to the WTO, has also threatened its own response internally when it comes, for instance, to the possibility of adopting an export tax. So I'm just wondering where the discussion stand when it comes to CBAM, because it's quite one thing, well, impacting the bilateral relations. Thank you.
Thank you. Lisa, I know you have to go, so if you want to go first.
Thank you. I'm not an expert on CBAM or any of that, but I think what I do want to say about that is, and again, I'm not speaking on behalf of the EU, so another caveat. We tend to miss, I think, sitting here in Brussels, the realities on the ground. I had a meeting this morning with somebody who works a lot on renewable energy projects in Asia, as also in India. And she was telling me, the problem with the EU is that we have these people sitting in Brussels at Schuman coming up with all of these policies, and then they don't actually go out there to understand that there are efforts being made. So it also becomes a definitional problem, right? What are we talking about exactly? And there are a lot of very smart people out there, much smarter than I am, who can actually, I think, come up with concrete solutions. And we need to tap much more into that as a resource, but not just here in Europe. We need to also be talking to people in the region so that there's a two-way interface. I think I mentioned this earlier, this feedback loop, it has to be there. And that's also based a lot, Ambassador, you mentioned this, on trust. How much can we talk frankly to each other? So I think that's really important. And then just on the point that you made, sir, you're a journalist and you've been following this for a long time and speaking to somebody in India about where Brussels is. I think we have the same problem here. Not just in Brussels, but in other, once you move outside of Paris or you move outside of Athens or London, no, UK is separate, still separate, I have to say. Continental Europe is one thing. So there has, again, this two-way reinforcement of knowledge building that we need to do. And I think this is why it's great to have an event like this so we can talk to each other. But these are people who are interested in these issues already. So we need to go outside of these boxes. Thank you, Fabian.
Patricia, to your question on learning, I think, when we listen to the word transaction, we attribute negativism to it. There's nothing wrong in transaction. I think every state at some level is going to be driven by putting its fundamental interests first, which the others would view it as transactional. And why it happens in a relationship between India and Europe would be a point which exactly Lizza said, and Nawabji, very nice to see you, is the point about perception deficit. I think there is a critical perception gap between both sides. For long, Brussels has looked at India. Go back to the 94 Asia strategy. Just read the story from there. And the 10-year jump to 2004, it's remarkable. Look at in place another Asia actor, and that is China. And then you look at the policy followed by the EU with both. And then if you ask, why does New Delhi respond that way? It's not based, because its perception on what Brussels does in terms of transaction with China is very different than what it does. It's appended the political end of the relationship with so much of a values-based discourse that there's no room to maneuver then, right? What happens when challenges come? Then you're forced to get into a binary view of looking at the world. The world cannot be looked at from a binary lens. I think that is problematic. You can't define one thing and say that this is challenge X is from a rule-based order, but when you have a different crisis in another geography of the world, that is not anything to do with the rules-based order. I think the whole world is watching in today's time. So I think it's important to recognize, and like I said, few in Delhi would, but I think the visit of the Commission President with the commissioners, her statement in Davos, and prior to that, when she was coming up for her second term, when she spoke about upping the strategic quotient of the India-EU partnership, was also the moment of a recognition of that business with India cannot be business as usual. I think this was a political signaling. And that political signaling matches, perhaps when you look at the timing, what she said earlier about expanding the strategic quotient was still when Trump had not come in. 5th of November had not taken place. Nobody knew that Trump was going to get elected. So I think that to me is important, to be able to foretell something before a political necessity of what happened in Washington is making the European Union reposition its strategic agenda. So the Davos statement of coming to India is a second important political signaling about upping the strategic quotient in the relationship. And so that brings me down to the FTA, and from the experience of the past, I think it's important to recognize that, of course, complementarities are important in doing, but I think it's important not to bring everything loaded onto that free trade agreement. Let's not assume that India, which today has the world's largest population, is not concerned about standards of living over there, is not concerned about the health of its citizens, or is not wanting to have a clean air quality. I mean, these are extremely important for the people of the country. So they cannot be just something which is driven from outside and made part of a trade agreement that, we are not concerned about, children being employed in industry, and that Europe is going to tell us that unless you don't do this, we will not get a trade agreement. It doesn't work that way. Your human rights is not the sole perspective and the right of only one set of people in the world. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way. And I'm sorry to be so blunt, because I think it assumes that the other parts of the world are not aware about human rights, right? I think then probably what happens in this discourse is that you forget that in 1947, when India became independent, I'm sorry to be repeating a story, but I'm not sorry to say it. We adopted a democratic pathway, the most difficult, right? And bringing transition with democracy is not easy when everybody has not understood the essence of democracy, but we decided to be innovative about it. So it is going to be a challenge. But let's not forget that Europe's last big challenge in 1945 came through out of a series of wars before, you decided to redefine your ability to cooperate with each other. So I think it's also important the way we frame political issues and not append it with extremely value-based ideas just because that is the way you would like to see the world. Then the challenge is when other actors look at Europe's relationship with other countries, they don't stand on the same level. You will be in finding it very difficult to explain your relationship to China. I think sitting from Delhi, it's very obvious. So I think it's important to, and I would say a simple framework is important. And more importantly, I think there's such a perception deficit on both sides. We really need to work on that. And that is important to even transform the political quotient of the relationship.
I take on this one. Concerning your question regarding the fact that European Union continue to be pretty much unknown in India, I fully agree. But I think European Union is a complex system, and I'd be surprised to know how many Europeans know their European institution well. I think even in Europe, we still have this deficit of knowledge. So definitely journalists have a big role to play, I agree. And I would even say, for example, again, on a French perspective, with France, India has a long-term partnership, I mentioned it, over 25 years. So we have cooperating in very sensitive domains like nuclear, defense, military, etc. And yet we realize that on both sides, our people don't know each other that much. If you go to India and you ask people about what they know about France, and you do the same exercise in Paris, what do you know about India? Probably they will mention Eiffel Towers, gastronomy, or I don't know, but yet there is a huge deficit. And this is why, for example, in France, and maybe this is something we can also take some inspiration for this new European partnership, we decided to insert a new chapter, what we call people-to-people ties. And this is very interesting. So, for example, we are planning to increase the number of visas. So we have more Indian students coming to France. This also starts with students with diaspora. For example, Indians have a strong connection, with US, with UK, with Australia, because there is diaspora. We don't have that in France. And I think, except maybe some specific European countries, there is not that big diaspora in the European Union. So this is an important point. Also increase the researchers exchanges as well. Cultural ties is also about doing some museum exhibition, etc., etc. So those are very interesting initiatives to have in mind, I think, even for the European partnership. Coming to the question, what we can learn from India as European? This is a very good question and quite challenging. And when you were mentioning the question, I had in mind a very famous sentence of Jaishankar, the Minister of Foreign Affairs in India, and he said Europeans have to stop thinking that the problems are the problem of the world, and it's a way of maybe decenter our mind. And again, I don't want to talk about Resina again, but what was interesting during this forum that was held in Delhi, it was, I think, a very unique place where you could see at the same table an Iranian researcher, a Russian researcher, an American researcher, And all these people were talking to each other, you know. And this is also a result of this multi-alignment policy that Delhi has run for now many years. But yet we have, it's true, difference of approach in our respective diplomacy, because yes, Indian diplomacy is based on interests. As you say, we can call it pragmatic or multi-line, but yet European diplomacy is based on values. And as a European, I am very, very attached to these values. And I think that we have to keep defending our values because it's part of our DNA. It's at the very heart of our European identity as well. So we have to find a way to reconcile both approach, definitely, maybe be a bit more flexible on some partnership, especially when Europe try to engage more with now what we call the global south, the BRICS. But I would not say we have to reframe totally our approach, and we have to keep defending also those values.
Thank you. We've got time for one more round of questions. I see 3 already, so one there.
Aditya Sharma, I am from Indian Business Chamber of Luxembourg. What we have seen here is that over the last 15 years, the various policies adopted by India, by Indian government, have been sort of criticized in the media in terms of values. Like if we take the example of farmers' law, it was said that it is not good for the farmers. But while it was designed on the same policy and principles which we see are prevalent in Europe and America. When we saw that India had this Citizenship Act, we also saw that it is against people and value-based criticism was there. Very recently, when India had this Kashmir problem solved, then it was also criticized in Europe on the grounds of values. Now, at this point of time, suddenly when Europe says that we want to be very good friends of India and want to go ahead with this, how do you convince your people who have been told all these years that India has a lot of value-based problems, that you suddenly go to them and say that let's make them our good friend? How do you solve this contradiction?
My name is Nagayo Taniguchi. I'm Japanese and a colleague of Nawab Khan. We covered 20 years ago this The Hague signing, and we were 20 years even younger. And today, every day we hear about European defense. The question is about defense union, defense industry together. What about India relations? India is one of the leading powers in the sector of defense industries. Like we have this famous Bengaluru international trade show. It's a leading power and it's becoming even more and more important. So Europe and India in the sector of the defense and defense policy and defense activities like peacekeeping missions that you said, and industry as well, what kind of relations will be most suitable in terms of two nations, but also in respect of the world stabilities and peace? Two people are missing, so you have a heavy burden.
Hello, Tim Neubauer from the Friedrich Naumann Foundation. I have two questions. The first one is sometimes we get a feeling as Europeans that we are in our own bubble. We don't know that other world areas see things different, that they have fundamental different views on it, even if they agree with values like human rights or other common shared values. Now my question is, how can Europe learn by its relationship with India, how to improve its defense strategy in the Indo-Pacific? And the second one, how can we use the development of the relationships with India as a blueprint to improve our relations with other countries, especially former colonies in the so-called global south? Thank you.
Thanks very much. So we only have 2 panelists left, so you have a lot of points to answer, but I want to add an additional one, predominantly for you, because I think this is a discussion which continues a bit on what we had before. But I think this is, it's a little bit, from my perspective, misleading to say that India is pragmatist and it's not looking at values or history, because one of the key points which also emerged in our discussions in India is that there is a very strong attachment to Russia. And that attachment very often comes back to the history, it comes back to the relationship which has been there. And that is a problem for Europeans, because when you're talking about what is in our direct interest now, then the security threat is very much in our direct interest. So having a close relationship with the aggressor who is threatening directly our borders is an issue, and that clearly also then leads to problems in particular areas of cooperation. And you were right that we maybe didn't recognize that beforehand, but I would say at least in Europe we collectively have learned that we were wrong on Russia, or at least many of us were wrong on Russia. There were some who always knew that this threat was there. But the current situation is one where, and that comes back also to hearing so much about defense, that is why this is the predominant topic, which overrules anything else. And I'll give you and any final remarks you want to make, then please do.
Yeah, I'll let you answer on the last one, but I just want to say that despite the neutrality of India on this Ukrainian-Russian war, what we have seen is the EU-India relation has still deepened. So it has not really affected yet the EU-India relation, which I find kind of interesting. Coming back maybe to the question of defense, you had 2 questions regarding defense. We collaborate already a lot on defense, especially France and India. I would say through 2 main channels. The first one is Make in India program. So this program of reinforcing the domestic industrial capacities of India. To give you a concrete example, for example, we have a French company called Naval Group. They are building the submarines. And we have a program when we construct 6 submarines in Mumbai with the Indian counterpart. So it's totally a domestic transfer of technologies. And I think Europe is a really strong partner for India for this Make in India program, especially in the defense sector that is so strategic for India. And we, on this one, have been definitely on the side of India. We do also cooperate through a lot of joint military exercise. So you were talking about the Indo-Pacific. Recently, some weeks ago, we had, for example, the French carrier that was inside the Indian Ocean, and we conducted a different exercise with the Indian part as well. So this helped us to understand how to work together, how to coordinate as well. So those exercises are also very, very important. Coming to the question of human rights, let's call it a human rights question. I would just answer by one word, the dialogue. This is what we can do to improve our cooperation on this, because it's a sensitive issue. Yes, you're right. Sometimes India perceive European reaction as political interference. But the only way to go through it is to have a window, an open window of dialogue. And again, I think Europe can be a very good level to have this dialogue. If I'm not wrong, there is still a dialogue on those questions between Europe and India, which is still active. So this is a place where we can also exchange our point of view, explain our disagreements, explain our different conceptions. And personally, I do believe that the fact that there is still this kind of dialogue and this kind of place is very important as well. To complete.
Thank you. Let me take the point, Sylvia, what you said about human rights and values. I mean, please don't get me wrong when I say that India doesn't subscribe to values. I think if you read the opening of the constitution, the preamble, nothing says it much better. And that holds even today. I think it's important to recognize that politically how you frame discourses in which you want to have a conversation has to be framed on the basis of a partnership which recognizes the other country as an equal. It cannot be less than equal. Otherwise, it cannot be a partnership. And in that, there is always space to draw attention that, you know, things can be better. But let it not be a unidimensional point where Brussels tries to tell New Delhi that, you know, there is such a such human rights issue in India. Because in India, as much as then I would draw attention to Europe, there is also a violation of rights over here as well, right? Then where does that dialogue and conversation take us? Nowhere. But if you make that the focal window, then you're going to miss the opportunity. The bus is going to leave the station. And I can tell you very clearly that, you know, that is not the basis on which you have this large trade relationship with China. How do you call it a competitor, a partner, and a systemic rival? I mean, from which values definition does it come? It doesn't come. It comes from the fact of a very pragmatic recognition that, you know, China is important. You know, even if you talk of any strategy today, for example, nobody's talking about decoupling. Everybody's talking about a de-risking strategy because that's a reality, right? So I think it's important to, you know, you can take all about values and rights, and they're important. I don't mean to dismiss them. I think India has, you know, always put values up front. But I think one also needs to recognize that let's, you know, not make it the focal window by which you will engage a country, because that's not what you actually do, you know. On to that point about relationships with countries, I think any partnership has to have a level of maturity and a level of recognition that what our geography provides for us will mean that we will always have both a challenge and an opportunity point in engaging other countries. Fabian, when you say that, you know, what do you do with India's close attachment to Russia? You said that India has a close relation to a country that's an aggressor. I can just turn that around to you and say, what will India do that you have such a close relationship with such a huge trade with a country that is an aggressor to India, right? So I think, you know, when we frame it in this context, my partner is your aggressor is my partner, we are not going to get anywhere. I think we have to frame it in much larger. That's why I said our geographies will, you know, create necessities and choices. And that's one part of it to recognize. From 2014, and this is a larger issue about how you look at the world and how do you make sense of politics. In 2014, you know, when developments took place in Ukraine, if one is being told, and the rest of the world is watching, the global south, which you like to put on the table, is watching what you do as response and as values, and you say that no international law got violated, and you continued with importing oil and gas for 8 long years till a tank rolled, then I think the global south has had a wake-up call already in 2014, and that got reinforced in 2022. Right, and now comes the other part of security, where where the administration in Washington clearly says that basically Europe look after your own security requirements, right? And so if you've never invested in security in that sense, you're scrambling to do it. There is a new coalition coming through in Berlin, where they've decided to even have a historical amendment to spend more on defense. But like I said, what can Europe see from other parts of the world? There are countries who are just looking at their own security because nobody else will come and bail them out. And that is where India is. So I think I would rather not get into framing a conversation on India and the EU by looking at it in such narrow terms. I want to ask if this is a point of inflection. The German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, said in 2022, it was a moment of Zeitenwende. I think the Zeitenwende in Europe is happening now. When a J.D. Vance can come to a Munich Security Conference and say what he does and what you saw, which happened in Washington. And that's the wake-up call. If that is the moment of the Zeitenwende, and we have the commissioners who've just been to India, then how transformative can we, that is Brussels and New Delhi, with the permission of the ambassador, since I'm not writing policy, how transformative can we think and redesign the relationship? I think there is a point of tremendous opportunity. There is a lot of political traction that we can bring. Quickly, just a point on defense, I think industrial cooperation is one way in which we can enhance. And I think Sylvia has already pointed out there's a lot of bilateral which is happening. You can see more of it. As far as peacekeeping, India has traditionally followed only UN mandated. We've been one of the largest contributing countries to peacekeeping, but it has always been under the UN mandate. We've never gone in for regional mandated peacekeeping operations. So I think what you've heard in Delhi, I don't know if it's wishful thinking or testing the waters, but it'll still, I think we're still far away from any even tacit understanding of what the ceasefire and what will come in terms of the end game, at least in Ukraine.
Can I just add something? 1 minute, because there's just one point I disagree with you. It's about our trade dependency vis-à-vis China. You mentioned that in Europe, it's an important trade partner, and I fully agree. But I just want to remind that India is really seriously dependent on China as well. And actually, the level of dependency of India, trade dependency vis-à-vis China, and Europe dependency vis-à-vis China is almost the same. So it's interesting because we all face the same concern of how we reduce our risk vis-à-vis China. And I think we both align on this one. And so this, for me, is typically a convergence. And it can be also an interesting part of our partnership between Europe and India, how we together de-risk our economy vis-à-vis China. It means that, for example, if in Europe we depend massively for our solar panels import from China, why not trying to invest in India? And this is something that has been put on the table already, to be able to diversify our partner and to bring also some benefits to the Indian economy. So this is typically a kind of win-win partnership, sharing the same concern on a concrete example.
So I thought before we conclude, Fabian, I'll say a few words. No, this has been a wonderful discussion, and I think all the panelists added a lot of value to the discussion. I just wanted to add a couple of points based on my experience over a year. I think Dr. Bava made the point, a very important point about how you frame the question. And by framing it wrongly, I think opportunities shouldn't be missed. But having said that, I must add that in my over a year out here, interacting with different European bodies and organizations, except for perhaps, some interlocutors from a particular disposition within your parliament, I think by and large, there has been very good understanding on most of these issues, things like values, transactionalism, Russia, all these, India's positions are well understood, and I think there is space for us. Now, Dr. Bava mentioned about, I think Russia tends to be a kind of a recurring theme, and understandably so. I wouldn't say it is an impediment in the relationship, but rather it takes up a lot of our discussion, which could have been used more productively in promoting more practical areas of cooperation. But again, it was just, I think, a couple of days ago, a Latin American ambassador mentioned this to me, and I think in a way he was echoing the sentiment which you expressed of Dr. Jaishankar about, why should Europe think that its problem are the world's problem? He said, we know Russia is the aggressor, but Russia is not my enemy. So if Russia is Europe's enemy, that does not automatically make Russia everybody's enemy. So I think perhaps the same sentiment, I think, put in a more stark manner. And then again, it brings us back to the point which Dr. Bava made, that, we could look at, aggressors of other countries also, and you should have the same standards of behavior for yourself as you impose on others. Human rights also, I just wanted to make. I think it is very educative reading the statement which came out of the last human rights dialogue. I think one conclusion which you can draw from it is that it was a dialogue of equals, and I was very happy with that. And Dr. Bava, you mentioned about problems in Europe. I mean, I'm accredited as ambassador to a country which does not recognize, I'm a Hindu, my religion as a religion. And when I first heard it in India, and I very innocently asked that, how can that be? So I was told, no, recognition does not mean that you do not have the right to practice and profess your religion. What it means is that you will not get the state support for the religion. Now, this brings me to a more fundamental question that, you are not treating all the religions on the same playing field. And on human rights, again, I mean, I always make the point that if you are evaluating human rights, I know what human rights mean. In a behavioral sense, you should look at countries and civilizations in a historical context too. And I think if you do evaluation in a historical context, I think there is a lot to be discussed and talked about there too. So coming back, I think it is hugely important for us that, that we frame the questions, as was mentioned by the panel, in a right manner. There is an opportunity for us, and it has been there in the past too, but to capitalize on this opportunity. And overall, my sense is that, India and EU are on the right track. Many of these things play out more in the think tank and parliamentary fora, rather than, when actual transaction of business takes place. So I think transactional nature, pragmatism, I think all of that is there when we try and transact business when EU and India transact their business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know we've reached the end of the time, although I'm incredibly tempted to continue a lot of this. But I think it just shows the importance of exchange and also to go into those areas where there are barriers, different comprehension of what we are facing, because that shows that this is a relationship which matters, and it is a relationship which will have to develop also in light of the changes which are happening globally. So it's very good to have this discussion. I'm sure we will have this discussion also in future. Next time, I will make sure that I sit on the panel and not moderate it. But I'm very, very grateful to the embassy for the cooperation, and thank you, Ambassador, for your remarks, and to the panelists for your input, and for all of you for taking part in this event. Thank you.